Have you ever woken up in the morning and you don't know where you are? Well, that happened to me today here in this Walmart parking lot because since January of 2019, and it's May now, I have been in Arizona, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. And I travel all the time. I travel all over the place. Sometimes I stay in one place more than another, but I thought that now might be a good time to talk to you guys about choosing your resident state and how to get a legal real ID if you travel as much as I do or you want to. This is where I woke up today. I'm in a beautiful little town in Utah. Of course, this is taken out the window above my greenhouse, but you can see here, I'm not in a campground. I'm actually in a Walmart parking lot. Good morning, everybody. It's Robin with Creativity RV, and as you know, I am a full-time nomad. I travel all the time, but I still had to choose one state to be a resident in. And if you guys have my book, Be a Nomad, Change Your Life, you probably already saw that there's a juicy chapter on mailing services and resident state and real ID. But for those of you that don't have it, I wanted to give you a video on how to choose a resident state and get all of the documentation and stuff that you need when you don't have an actual physical domicile that you can have all that stuff sent to. Picking a resident state is one of those pesky logistics that you have to deal with when you become a full-time traveler. And now look, I'm not a CPA or an attorney, or I'm not licensed in insurance anymore, so do the research for yourself or talk to an actual professional if you have some more in-depth questions. So here's the question you really want to ask yourself. Are you going to be dividing out your time pretty evenly, or are you going to be like snowbirding it, like going to Arizona for 6 months and then traveling the other 6 months? If that's the case, you might want to consider Arizona. But if, like me, you're kind of divvying up your time equally, then you really do get to choose. What you want to be careful about is that it doesn't look like you're spending all of your time in one place, but you've decided to become a resident in another. They use something called a nexus to determine what states you're closest to the most when it comes to things like taxes. And intention is key. So you don't want to look like you're just in one state for one benefit and going to another state for another benefit. That can get a little tricky. So a best practice for most people, unless their situation is more complicated, is just to choose one state. And you can look at that state, based on all kinds of different things. I have talked to a few other nomads about this, and I think it's really interesting that you can be in one state or one community and it looks just like the next state. Same economics, same demographics, same Applebee's on the corner, and in one place people are super friendly and they say hello, and in the next place they're just crabby, like this place. So as a nomad, you actually have the benefit of getting to choose what community or what state you want to become a resident of. Now, you do all that research, you look at the economics or the insurance or whatever it is that you're taking into consideration when you're determining what state you want, and then you might say, but Robin, I don't have a lease or a mortgage or, have any access to an actual physical residence that I can use to become a resident. How do I do it? When you choose your state, you really want to go into the DMV site for that state, and I have links for all that stuff in the book if you need it. You want to go in and you want to see what documentation they require to prove residency. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mix in Real ID here. If you guys are not familiar with the Real ID Act, it was passed after 9/11, actually, and it's going into effect October of 2020, I believe. So you might think, yeah, I've got time, no big deal. It is a big deal if you need to get your hands on certain documents, like if you've been divorced or had a name change or have lived in lots of different states or something like that, where you need to pull documentation, because that can get a little bit hairy, I've read. Basically, here's the deal. After 9/11, the federal government wanted there to be a more consistent requirement for the states for how they gave out driver's licenses and what documentation they required to get the driver's licenses. Now, I have heard some nomads think that the Real ID Act is just to track everybody and, you know, make sure that they can't travel. And I know that some people feel that way, but actually it's been around since just after 9/11 when it was passed. And here's the deal, it's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect you whether you're a nomad or whether you travel or not. Because after 2020, if your state complies with this, and some states are fighting it, but if they do, you're going to need a driver's license that has a little gold star up in the corner. And that means that you have met these new requirements. Now here's where it will affect everybody, even if your state doesn't do it. And most of the states are, you guys. That fight seems to be up a little bit. But you cannot fly domestically anymore after 2020 without a driver's license with that little gold star. You'd have to use a passport. And you also cannot get into some federal buildings without a Real ID with that little gold star. So it sounds really daunting. It sounds like it's going to be tough to get one. And how can you become a resident and meet these new requirements if you're a nomad? It's not hard. This is how you can do it. There's a few different ways. First of all, some people will rent 30 days at an RV park, something like that, which a lot of states accept. You can be a resident in one place for 30 days and use that address if you want. You can also still use a friend or a family member's address if they claim you as a resident. Some people that are remote workers can use their company's address with permission of their company. But for the rest of us, one thing that you can do is get an address, a physical address. You cannot do a P.O. box. You can't use a P.O. box to get a driver's license. And then the driver's license affects all kinds of other things after this that I'll tell you. So what you want to do is you want to find a mailing service that has a real physical address. Now, let me stop here and say this. Mailing address and resident address are two different things. Now, they can be the same address, but a mailing address or a mailing service, of course, is just there to like shuttle your stuff, you know, to and from you. Your resident address is where all of your legal stuff is based, like your driver's license, you know, stuff for taxes, registration, insurance, health insurance, all that stuff. So even if you use a mailing service like Good Sam or Escapees, you really want to make sure that the address they're going to give you is Real ID compliant. I called several of these services when I was doing research for the book, and at that time, only Escapees had an address that was compliant with the Real ID Act and looked like a real physical address. So just make sure that you ask them that, because if you want to kill two birds with one stone and have the mailing and the residence address be the same, and you choose a mailing service that doesn't comply, then it won't work. So again, you find some kind of a mailing service like mailboxes, etc., for example, usually has a street address instead of a box number. So you can actually take that street address and use it to get your other requirements necessary for your driver's license. Now, every state's going to be different, you guys. Go in and look at a certain state. But if you look at the actual Real ID requirements, this will work for all states that are Real ID compliant unless they've gone above and beyond that. So a lot of people think that you need to have a lease or a mortgage, and there are a couple of states that do that, but you don't need to have just that to get a driver's license and a Real ID driver's license. You just have to have some kind of legal or financial documents sent there. So let's say you get a box at mailboxes, etc., and it says 123 Main Street, right? Then you have your checking account, for example, or your insurance cards or your credit card statement, something like that, sent to 123 Main Street. And then you get that stuff from the mailbox, either have it forwarded to you, which is what they do, or go in and pick it up. And then you have to physically take those pieces of mail down to the DMV in the state where you want to be a resident. Now, you can't do this in the beginning online or over the phone. You have to get your first driver's license in person. So you're going to be in that state because you're a resident of that state, right? So you just take that stuff down. You show them maybe, you know, your birth certificate, your old driver's license, whatever it is that that state requires. And then to prove you're a resident of that community, you show them that mail. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lease or a mortgage. And then they are going to, of course, mail you your new driver's license, and you have to get that forwarded to you because most of the time they don't give you one on the spot anymore. Then you can take that driver's license and you can do your insurance, and you can use that same address for your taxes, and you can register to vote and all of that stuff. Now again, you guys, go into the DMV of all the different states you're considering. For me personally, I did a little spreadsheet to decide which one I wanted to go to, because you know me, that's what I do. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. It's actually not that different from what you did when you had a regular sticks and bricks house. The tricky part is getting an address that you can use as a resident address, whether that is through a mailbox company or a family member or a business, and if you have to, an RV park for a month. And that's how you do it. I hope you guys have found this helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends if they need the information. I hope to see you all out on the road soon. Until then, everybody have happy travels and be free.